lies that you're stewing. Don't stray far from the heart.
Hello and welcome to the Witchlit podcast. And I'm here today with the lovely Laura Perry, who's very kindly agreed to join us what is quite first thing in the morning for her. So hi to Laura.
Hi.
So it's just me today. Sheena's been really busy. And she's really caught up today as well. And so I'm just going to announce for her that her book, The Madness and the Magic, is now available to buy on Amazon, both in ebook and paperback. And you can also pre-order book 2 as well, Bonkers and Broomsticks. So we'll put a link to that in the box somewhere that goes with this podcast. But yeah, so we're both wishing Sheena all the best today, launching the paperback. And hoping that everything's going well for her. So I'm going to get Laura to introduce herself, tell us a little bit more about her, and then we'll move on from there. Laura.
Oh, I always hate trying to introduce myself. It's like trying to write the little bio that goes at the end of an article. I'm a pagan / witchy author and artist. I write fiction and nonfiction. I do art. I've done a tarot deck, and I have another tarot deck in process right now, a collaboration with some other people. I like ancient cultures, mystery. I think the world is full of magic if we only turn our eyes toward it. So that's me.
Excellent. And whereabouts are you talking to us from?
From the Atlanta, Georgia area in the southeastern United States.
Okay, because so for people who are just tuning in for the first time, I live in Wales, and Sheena, who also runs the podcast with me, she lives in England. So we're scattered across the globe, which is really awesome, and it's our witchiness that brings us together. So we're going to start with In the Broom Cupboard, like we do on every podcast, just filling you in with what we've been doing in the last couple of weeks between the podcasts. So I've been continuing to write my 5th Witchlit novel, The Able Witch. And as I spoke about on the very first podcast, I'm writing the last 3 of a series of 6 before I then publish the last 3. I'm really worried about getting to book 6 and thinking, oh, I wish I'd put something in book 4. So I'm hanging on to 4, 5 and 6 until I'm really happy with it. So I've been working on that, and I've also recently had a short story accepted for another anthology that's going to be out with Zimbel in May, which is quite exciting too. I've written something that I'm not really very good at, which is writing in the first person, but I tried something new, and they seem to like it, so it's going to be really good to share that too. So Laura, what have you been up to in the last couple of weeks?
I just finished the first draft of a new novel, so this will be this will be my third novel, and this one's big. It's a major project. It's a historical fiction set among the Minoans of ancient Crete, and my main character is a priestess in a temple there. So, excellent. Yeah.
So how's it been finishing a novel?
It's a relief in one sense, because this is a bigger story than I've done before. My first novel, Jaguar Sky, was just a short little story about a girl's adventures in Central America. And then my second novel, The Bed, was a little longer. And that's Witchlit, magical realism, I guess you could call it. And this one is just, it's about the length of the last book in the Harry Potter series. So I felt like maybe I wasn't up to the task. About halfway through, I thought, oh gosh, can I even do this? But the Save the Cat book helped me get a handle on the plot structure. So I'm very pleased with what I've got so far. Obviously, it's a first draft, so it still needs editing. But yeah, I feel very proud of myself in a sort of little kid kind of way. Like, I did this thing, I did this big scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I already know this, but you've had to fit in writing this novel, you know, because of, you know, running your daughter places and stuff, like, you know, you've had to fit this in, and you've, yeah, to finish something that awesome and that big, when you've kind of had to really properly make the time and focus on it. Yeah, you should be jumping. You should be jumping up and down. It's brilliant news. I am so excited to read it. Okay, so obviously that's been keeping you busy for 2 weeks.
Yes.
So how long did it take to write?
I actually started it about 5 years ago, and I kind of, it overwhelmed me, the level of complexity of the story, and I set it aside, and I picked it up again about a year ago. And so I guess it probably took me about a year and a half of solid writing to get it all down.
Wow.
Yeah, and talking about taking my daughter places, she is in college now at a local school, and I took her down there for the beginning of classes, and I stayed on campus that day, and I discovered the library there, and it's this marvelous, dead quiet place, and the energy is so intense. Everyone is just focused and working, and there's no Wi-Fi, so there's no internet, and it's a very, very focused kind of energy. And so every day that she had class, I went down there and I sat myself down in the library and I wrote. And that's how I got it done. And it was almost like a magic spell being there, because I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't get up and leave without having to pack everything up. And, you know, so it worked really well. It was very much a get her done kind of vibe.
So did you write it by hand?
Say that again?
Did you write it by hand? Did you do
Oh.
pen on paper?
No. I did it on my laptop. I usually combine typing and writing, so I just kind of barf the words out onto the page, you know, on the laptop to get the first draft down. And as I was writing, you know how when you're part of the way through a story and you think, oh gosh, I really wanted this thing to happen 3 chapters ago.
Yeah.
And I learned a while back that if I stop and go back each time I think of one of those things, I'll never get to the end. So I took a pad of paper and I started writing down each time I thought one of those things. And so I had it there. I wouldn't lose it. I wouldn't forget it. And I could come back to it later. And so when I finally got done with the draft, I now have, here, I'll show you. These are my notes that I wrote down.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have to go through all of these now and incorporate them. That's the next stage, is the editing. So I've got to incorporate those into the draft.
That's really
but yeah,
interesting.
I think that.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, it let me get it done, because I'm one of those writers that I'll keep circling back over and over again and then never move forward. And so that gave me a safety that I wasn't going to forget those things. So now my next job is to go through the draft and add all of those like 25 pages of handwritten notes back in.
But also, while you're doing that, you'll be, because you'll be rereading parts of the text when you go back with it, effectively you'll be doing a first edit on them as well, if you need to to insert something. So I think that's a brilliant idea. So people, you know, writers watching, I mean, I'm going to do it. I think that's a brilliant idea. I do what you say. I keep going back and putting things in, or I have a habit of I write things in capital letters just in the text. So I'll actually just write something like, don't forget to say this, you know, when Lizzie meets Patricia or something. I'll actually write it in capitals so that when I then go back to look at it, it'll jump out. But I love the idea of the book. I'm going to do the book. You sold me on that one. That's a brilliant idea. Thank you. Excellent. So so what about what drew you to magic and magical writing in the first place? I mean, maybe that's two different questions. What drew you to magic and what drew you to magical writing? I don't know.
One of the podcasts that I listen to regularly has a question that they ask all of their guests at the beginning, and that question is, were you a weird kid? And I was thinking about one day how I would answer that question, and I think by standard modern definition, all kids are weird kids to start with, right? It's perfectly natural for any child to go out and talk to the trees and the rocks and the bugs. They don't think there's anything strange about that. And so we get that. I think we all start out with a magical mindset. We all start out understanding that the world is a magical place. And eventually that gets kind of trained out of us. Some of that's just not acceptable, or you know, it's not scientific. And a lot of us circle back around to it and find that, you know, your inner 5-year-old, I guess, who saw the world as a magical place, a literally magical place, as well as a figuratively magical place. And at some point, I think that happened to me. You know, I had gone through school, and I had gone through university, and I had the job, and something just snapped one day, and I realized that's not all there is. There are these other layers and these other, you know, and so I kind of remembered what it was like as a child on my grandparents' farm, talking to the trees and the animals and the rocks. And so I think it's not so much.
Why you didn't do it anymore, Laura? Did you just sort of think, why don't I do that anymore? Or do you think though that you had to do some of the normal stuff so that you could kind of realize there was more?
That's a good question. I did, because that's what I'm supposed to do, as so many of us do. Oh, this is what, you know. I don't know that I necessarily had to do that. There are still cultures where you don't lose the idea of the magic, right? But I think it made it that much more moving when I finally came back around to it. It kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my gosh, there's this whole aspect of the world that I have been studiously ignoring for years, and it's all still right there. You know, it didn't go away. I just quit looking at it.
Yeah. And I think something that we've, you know, Sheena and I were talking last week about stress and how the world kind of adds so many pressures and things that we forget. Yes. or we don't have time to actually stop and listen or actually look properly, because we're so busy needing to get on to the next thing. So, you know, I've done a talk before where I've talked about magic as being those moments that you've taken the time to see, or you've taken the time to be 100% present in. rather than while you're doing something, thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner and all those other things. You know, that idea of
Right.
being present can make those kind of magic moments, if you like. So you've been
Yeah.
talking about the Minoans quite a lot, and I wondered why Minoans. So for me, I've been interested in some of the Minoan civilization and its history when I first saw an image of the bull leaper. So when I saw that image, that's what. So I'm quite a visual person, and as soon as I saw that, I was just intrigued. I wanted to know more, and so then I started looking and finding old books and I, in fact, somewhere probably in a box under the bed, there's a half-started novel that involves a bull leaper. So yeah, that's what it got it for me. So why Minoans for you and your magic?
That's funny because it was the bull leaper fresco for me too.
Oh,
Yeah. I was in high school in ninth grade, and I had an art history class, and we had this enormous thick book. And I mean, really, it was like this thick. I thought I was carrying an unabridged dictionary around. And one day, fairly early in the class, the teacher had us open the book to a section of color plates. And I flipped through, and there was a full-size, full-color, glossy photo of the bull leaper fresco, and I just got shivers. It was just, it pinged something deep in my psyche. And that was, I'm old enough that was, you know, years before anyone had even conceived of the idea of the internet.
yeah.
So I had to pick up crumbs where I could. I mean, the Minoans were literally just a couple paragraphs in the encyclopedia at that time. I went through and I found all of the art that I could from there, and found a few little tidbits that I could. And over the course of my teenage years, I had a bunch of dreams that I have come to interpret as fragments of past life memories from Minoan Crete. And so I feel like I do have that connection there. But it wasn't until well into the 90s that I started actually finding real information about them, you know, books, and then the internet with its layers and layers and layers of information. But yeah, it has been, you know, since I was what, 14, 15, it has been sort of hovering around me.
That's awesome. So people listening in might not know, but you're also a fabulous artist. So has your love for the Minoan civilization, has that changed the way that you, I was going to say do art? That is so badly worded. I do apologize. But does you know does that kind of affect the way that you paint or draw, do you think?
I think it does. I don't think it did until I started the Minoan Tarot project.
Oh.
I wanted a Minoan Tarot deck. I think you'll find this is probably true for an awful lot of pagan authors and artists. They want something and they look for it, and there isn't one out there, so they make it themselves. That's how a lot of stuff comes about. And I wanted a Minoan Tarot deck, and there wasn't one. And so I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? Because tarot is recent. It kind of bubbled up out of the Renaissance in Italy. And so there was no tarot in ancient Minoan times. So I thought, okay, I write fiction. So imagine a world where tarot existed. How would a Minoan artist do it? Using the symbols and the images of their culture. And so that's what I ended up doing was, and I'll be very honest here. If I had known how big a project it was, I don't think I would have taken it on in the first place. It wasn't until I was eyeball deep in it that I really realized, it's 87 individual original works of art
That's
that are then made into the cards. So yeah, it's I've got the cards here. I was going to see if I could find. I actually used the Bull Leaper as two of the cards. Here's Balance, which would be Temperance in Waite Smith deck. So I decided to do this deck in the style of the Minoan frescoes, right? So I had to study the Minoan art and use the colors that they use. I even, researched what kinds of pigments they use to make the different colors. So I did this entirely in the style of Minoan art. And it took me 3 years to make all of these, to do all the art for the deck. And by the time it was done, my art style had changed because I had been doing Minoan style art for long enough. There's actually
changed. I see.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see it behind me here. They're on the wall behind me. There are two of my paintings. The one on the right is the Morrigan, and the one on the left is the Minoan sun goddess Tarasia. And so the Morrigan I did a number of years ago, and she's just a very sort of standard modern witchy style art. And then Tarasia is very much a sort of modernized Minoan style. So yeah. That's funny. I didn't even know you were going to ask that question, and there they are on the wall.
There they are. Brilliant. Awesome. Okay, well, yeah, so why magical writing? Why and also why do you think it's important to have magical writing out there?
Why magical writing? Because the world is a magical place, and it feels kind of dishonest to portray it otherwise, if that makes any sense.
That's a good answer. That's a very good answer. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
I experience the world as a magical place, so I just can't imagine writing about it any other way. Yeah. So what was the second half of that question?
I was saying why do you think magical writing's important, so to have it? I mean, for instance, we've been trying to get a new category as actual witch lit, and the reason being that so that it can open that idea of magical writing to a much wider fiction reading audience, but magical realism is about as far as that they'll go. So so the idea being that why do we think it's important to get it out there? I mean, you've already said that obviously that's the way the world is, but then we know the problem with coming out to certain groups or certain people and saying that we're witches, and the way that can be perceived and things like that. So I just wondered, so some of your views on that.
Well, I think it stems from the idea of portraying the world that way. The vast majority of us in the Western world don't come up through life viewing the world as magical. We have it sort of figuratively beaten out of us by the grown-ups, right? And so we have to come back to it. And having magical writing out there provides that many more points of contact for people to have the aha moment and come back to it. Just a purely materialistic view of the world is really not very fulfilling. There's that sort of emptiness. And so maybe a fiction is a really good way to kind of sneak ideas in without pounding people with them. And so when they when they read a particular concept or worldview in fiction, it's not threatening, and they can either accept it or reject it as they like. But for people who are ready for that, who are open to it, who are looking for another layer of being, that gives them that many more opportunities to experience that. So yeah, it's important, definitely.
Yeah, and just like you were saying earlier, the reason that I wrote Destiny of Angels and Wrath of Angels originally was because I'd read some of Dion Fortune's books, absolutely loved them, was clamoring for more, read all that I could, and then couldn't find any books that were like hers. All the books around at the time were vampires and werewolves. They weren't about real people and real magic. And so that's why I chose to that they were the first two that I wrote, which were about high magic and about the Kabbalah, and which were concepts that I was learning about. But Dion Fortune's books were the only fiction that kind of embrace those concepts within a fictional way, which makes it so much easier to understand than always reading a non-fiction book. So in my naivety, I attempted to do the same, which is why I've never written the third book, because obviously that's the most important one. I've started it twice, and it feels a bit like you were saying about the book that you've just finished. The third book feels a bit big for me. But similar to you, that was a reason for doing it. So, and that somebody was saying to me the other day, why do writers write when it's so hard to get our books out there, where our books are stolen and all sorts of things happen to us? Why do we do it? And I think it is, for me, it is still that compulsion to have a story and have something that I want to say put out there. So why do you write, Laura?
Because I have stories to tell. I think storytelling is an impulse that goes back to the beginning of humanity.
Yeah, so however hard it is, it doesn't make any difference, does it?
I mean, most of the creative people I know are in the same boat. We have to create, whether it's art, music, literature, dance, any of those things. It's like it's a deep-seated impulse within us to generate that stuff and share it with others. And I think that's part of what makes humans human. We've told stories, as far back as sitting around the fire in a cave. So yeah, I think it's and for some of us at least, it feels like a basic human impulse. We're just sort of doing it in a modern context.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So talking about storytelling, we're now come on to Witchanori. So rather than me read anything, I'm going to ask Laura to read us something. So which I don't know what it is either. So it's a lovely surprise for me too. So what are you going to read to us?
Yeah, well, I thought at first that I would read something from the bed, but I've already actually got a couple readings from that up on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So I thought instead I would tease everybody with a short scene from the working title is The Last Priestess of Malia. And Malia was a Minoan town along the coast just east of Knossos. The story covers her life from the time she became a priestess until the very end. And as it went along, the story became more politicized than I had really expected it to. But given what was going on during the very end of Minoan civilization, I guess, I should have expected that. So anyway, this is her. Her proper name is Ariadne. But everyone calls her Aria. And Belisius is her consort in the temple. So, come, let me help you bathe, Belisius said. Tired almost to exhaustion, Aria dragged herself over to the small terracotta bathtub in the corner of her private quarters. She was naked, having left the blood-soaked hide skirt spread out on a table in the storage room to dry out. She would go back and fold it onto a shelf in a day or two. She stepped into the tub, sat down, and began scrubbing the blood off her chest and arms. As she washed, Belisius poured water from a pitcher to rinse her skin. The cool liquid refreshed her, a welcome relief from the summer heat. She felt like more than just the blood of the sacrificial bull was being borne away. You are counting the years, he said, as she stood up and stepped out of the tub. She turned to look at the layer of bloody water that remained after her bath. Every summer solstice that I slay a bull is 1 year closer to the day I must do the same to you. She took the linen towel that he offered and began to dry herself off. Another will come after me, he said. I know, but though he will be Belisius, he will not be you. She sat down on the edge of her bed, picking at the trim on the tunic she had laid out to wear. Too many thoughts crowded her head. She had come to rely on this consort, to lean on him more than the previous one. She trusted him, shared things with him that she dared not speak to anyone else. With a start, she realized she had fallen in love with him in a way she had not done with any other man, not even Sagaleus. What would she do when he was gone and the threat of Knossos still loomed? Belisius sat down beside her. Glaukos worries you. Of course he worries me, she snapped, then regretted her tone. She gentled her voice as best she could, fighting against the wave of emotion the Knossos leader's name always raised in her. That message he sent after Thalamica and Odris, the words caught in her throat. He had no right to make those demands. The message had arrived less than a moon after Aria had sent Thalamica and Odris to their deaths on the mountaintop. Glaukos had insisted that she had no right to pass judgment over people who were working for him, even if they were clergy in Aria's temple. He had demanded that whenever any situation involving Knossos occurred in the future, she send the people to him for judgment. Though the message had not stated it outright, the implication was clear. If Aria interfered with Knossos' ambitions again, her own life would be in danger. Do you really think they have someone within this temple who would attack me, take me down if Glaukos ordered it? He lifted the tunic from her grip and helped her slip it on. I doubt it. I think if he had as much power as he blusters on about, he would have taken us over already. I suppose so, she said, not really believing him. He is all threats, his sails full of the wrong kind of wind. She huffed out a laugh at the play on words, but they both knew Glaukos was far more dangerous than a bout of intestinal vapors. Standing, she wrapped her skirt around her hips and tied the cords. We have passed a turning point and you know it. We cannot go back to the way things were before the mainlanders came. I fear there is no one left whom I can trust. She stroked a finger down his jaw. Except you.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that with us. That's you know, and that's just been written. That's fresh off the press, ladies and gentlemen. That is awesome. That's
and it might change in final version because I haven't edited yet. But,
so exciting. That was a real tease. Thank you so much for that. And And if it's all right, if you could finish with drawing us a card from your tarot deck, that would be so brilliant. Sorry, I've just lost my earring there. There we go.
So here we go, flagrant self-promotion. It's the Minoan Tarot.
So where can we get hold of that from, Laura?
It's available pretty much everywhere. Schiffer Publishing is my publisher, so you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, all the big places online. A lot of metaphysical bookstores carry it or can order it for you. So it goes through all the major distributors. And so here we go. I'm going to awkwardly shuffle a tarot deck. When they asked me for my design specifications, I said, don't make the cards any bigger than 3 by 5 because my hands aren't big enough to shuffle anything bigger than that. So today's card is, oh my gosh. Well, there we go. I did just shuffle. You saw me. I shuffled.
I did see you shuffle them, yeah.
So
Balance.
This card is labeled Temperance in the Waite-Smith deck. So it's balance here. This is a portion of the Bull Leaper fresco. This is a bull leaper who is balancing on the back of a bull that's running across the ring. So to me, this is all different kinds of balance. This is obviously physical balance, but there's also an incredible amount of mental balance and control that's required here. And it's also, in a sense, a balance between the sort of domesticated or tame and the wild, because this is an enormous, dangerous animal that's been trained, right, and that's doing this activity with a human being. So this is like the borderline between our own inner tame and wild as well.
Cool.
So and it's good to keep a balance between both of those, I think.
Absolutely. I'm loving the colors. You said about researching the colors. The colors are just fabulous on those. They're really stunning.
Thank you. Yeah, this border, this is the border on all the major arcana, and it's the border that was on the Bull Leaper fresco. There were actually at least 3 different Bull Leaper frescoes. One of them had a blue background, one had a more sort of tan colored background, one had a dark red background. So there were several of these throughout the temple at Knossos. And they're all frescoes, which means they were painted onto wet plaster, which is how they survived. Because the plaster actually came apart. They didn't find these on the walls. They found them in piles of pieces on the floor. And so it was like putting a jigsaw puzzle back together when a bunch of the pieces are missing and you don't know what the picture's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
So, the archaeologists who did that were pretty amazing.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Laura. It's been so nice chatting to you. You can find Laura's books and tarot cards on Amazon, other major retailers, and and you said major retailers for the tarot cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you find the tarot cards in bookshops as well?
Yes. And if your shop doesn't carry them, they can order them because the publisher uses all the major distributors.
Oh, brilliant. That's excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been really nice. So thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to me chatting with Laura. And next time it will be probably just Sheena, as I'm going to be at my son's, and chatting to her is going to be Rachel Patterson, so a lady who is published by Moon Books and Llewellyn. I don't know her, so I shall be tuning into the podcast afterwards too. So thank you again, Laura, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again very soon. Keep writing. Bye.
Bye.